We're back at it again. Welcome to the Riding the Bench Eagles podcast. I am Asif Badi, your host of this show. And like you, I am a Philadelphia Eagles fan. And let me ask you guys something. I've been a fan since 2007. That's when I first started watching football. And outside of McNabb and a little stint with Mike Vick, there's always been question marks regarding the quarterback position in Philadelphia. Hell, even at the end of Donovan McNabb's tenure, brought in Kevin Kolb. Kevin Kolb gets hurt. Mike Vick has that stellar season. And then Mike Vick gets hurt, and Nick Foles comes in with the Chip Kelly era, has the 26-2 season. And then after that, we bring in Sam Bradford. And then after Sam Bradford, we get Carson Wentz. And then we all know the deal with Carson Wentz, turned to 2017 and all this. All the great memories that was. And now Jalen Hurts. And Jalen Hurts is now in a position where he's coming off a really bad year. And now people are starting to question whether or not this is Carson Wentz 2.0 because there's reports about him not being the most accessible in the locker room, or that his leadership style is brought into question. The fact that his personality is not being brought out more and that he needs to be more of a vocal leader. All that bullcrap in regards to leading a football team. Listen, you're either good at football or you're not. And Jalen Hurts, say what you want, is good at football. And he's a guy who was at the driving force of being a Super Bowl champ, basically. They were 3 points shy of doing that. And he had a bad season in 23, as the whole team did, as Nick Sirianni did, and everybody in the organization had a bad year. But then it led to the coaching hires that ended up being Fangio and Kellen Moore. And I found those hires to be interesting because if you look at what the dynamics were in the Philadelphia Eagles organization, it seems like those hires were not necessarily Nick Sirianni's hires per se. I'm sure Sirianni suggested guys. I'm sure he suggested these names. But to me, this has the fingerprints of the Eagles organization stepping in and saying, you know what? These are the guys you're going to bring in. We gave you your chance with bringing in, Brian Johnson and having him as OC, letting Sean Desai come in and be DC, and bringing in Matt Patricia as an advisor, and then ultimately switching that. Again, we've talked about it in episodes past. This organization seems to really, really like to have control. And Sirianni, I've defended him in the past, but the problem is he seems to be a little bit of a front runner, and he seems to be a guy who, will bend the knee, so to speak. Not necessarily a guy who's going to stand on his morals or his laurels, whatever the saying is. Kind of like what Doug Peterson did with Howie Roseman in the past, which is part of the reason why he got fired. I also believe he got fired because I felt that he handled the Carson Wentz situation in one of the worst ways I've seen as a coach. But they didn't want to bring some guys back. He said, fuck that. You get rid of them, you get rid of me. I'm going to keep my guys. And they said, all right, fuck it. Let's get rid of you too. And so they did. The question now is, now that they said, okay, you're bringing in Kellen Moore because we don't trust your coaching hiring process, and Nick Sirianni agreed, and he's also agreed to be a little bit more hands-off in terms of the offense and not necessarily influence the play calling, and now this is going to be Kellen Moore's show. The question becomes, will Kellen Moore bring out the best in Jalen Hurts? To me, that answer is yes. Now, he's going to have a big challenge on his hands because what would constitute as a really good season for Philadelphia is the question. I don't know. The NFC is in such a place where it can be had. So I'll put it to you like this. I think everybody in the organization and on this team has different definitions of what it means to be a success this year. We'll start with Vic Fangio. His job is basically to say, let's take this worst defense in the National Football League, make them respectable. Because if we do that, you're probably going to win about 3 to 4 games just by that alone. Okay? Let's call it that. We're going to add up wins here. 3 to 4 wins, let's just say, on the defensive side of the ball alone. Okay. Now you got the offensive side of the ball. Just with better play calling, you could probably win another 2 to 3 games. Now all of a sudden you're a 500 team. And then when you add that with the talent on the offensive side of the ball, with Jalen Hurts, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert, you're telling me their talent alone can't win you, 3 to 4 games? All of a sudden, you're at a 10 and 11 win team already. And considering the fact that your schedule is relatively light, you got a playoff team here. So for everybody in this organization, Vic Fangio just needs to make this team respectable. Kellen Moore just has to get Jalen Hurts in this offense to be functioning again. And I believe he will. And I think he's going to be able to do that by, making throws easy for Jalen Hurts and making this offense run like a functioning unit by, developing a running game, building off of it with play action, having him roll out a little bit more, and have concepts where it moves the receivers, motioning them, getting them in position to be open down the field more, because that's what this offense really wants to do. They want to open it up and, let the ball fly. And then now the question now becomes with Sirianni is what's going to constitute a successful season for him? Because he's got 1 year left on his deal. They got rid of basically everybody on his coaching staff that he hired, brought in a whole new group, and if they felt that Nick Sirianni was going to be their coach, don't you think they would have re-signed him already? Don't you think they would have said, "Oh, you got 1 year left on your deal? Let's add another 2 to 3 years to that contract." But no, this year he's coaching for his job. This is the year where they said, okay, are coordinators making you, or are you the guy who's going to be able to operate this football team? We saw what happened in 22. That was basically Steichen's run with his offense. And then we saw what happened last season where Sirianni was a little bit more involved in the game planning and the offensive play calling with Brian Johnson and them. And it looked anemic. And now this offseason, they said, Sirianni, you're going to be hands-off in terms of the play calling. We'll let Kellen Moore run this show. And if Kellen Moore brings out the best in Jalen Hurts, if he gets this team to play quality offensive football, my question to you, what would be the reason to bring Sirianni back? What would be the reason to say, you know what? He deserves another few years as head coach. Because then the question becomes, what exactly is Sirianni doing as head coach? And now it leads me to this question. Kellen Moore, if he brings out the best in Jalen Hurts by making easy throws, getting this offense to function again, making him move, making the pocket move, rolling him out, developing a running game, play action, all the things that you need to do, innovation, motion, all these things. What would constitute, or what would make Philadelphia say, you know what? Maybe Sirianni isn't our guy. The guy that we have is in the building right now, in Kellen Moore. And think about it. Philadelphia hires coaches who are young, relatively innovative, offensive play calling coaches who've had success in the National Football League or who've had success, at different levels of football, high level of success, because Chip Kelly was a college coach at Oregon. He was having massive success there. Doug Peterson had success with the Kansas City Chiefs. And then he came here, won a Super Bowl. And then Sirianni was a coach or a coach under Frank Reich who Philadelphia respects tremendously. And it's not like Sirianni hasn't had success before. He's had success in developing wide receivers. He's had success with Phillip Rivers and all that stuff, right? So he has a track record, so to speak. But is Kellen Moore more than just an offensive coordinator for Philadelphia? And if he hits with Jalen Hurts, after the year we just had when Sirianni's hands were all over this thing, and now it's hands off, what's to say Philadelphia isn't going to look at that and say, you know what? Forget Sirianni, Kellen Moore, the younger, more innovative, more creative play caller who's going to bring continuity for Jalen Hurts, as this is actually like, what is freaking 7th or 8th damn coordinator in the last 8 years, essentially. God never catches a break in terms of having a consistent coach. You bring consistency to the quarterback position for the play calling perspective. The scheme will always be there. What's to stop Philadelphia from doing that? I mean, you tell me. Because to me, I find this dynamic really, really interesting in Philadelphia. The fact that Nick Sirianni's contract has not been renewed, the fact that he's basically coaching for his job, and they brought in Vic Fangio, who's not going to get a head coaching position anytime soon, who's going to be a hell of a coach in Philadelphia in terms of developing younger guys. I think that's going to be able to happen. Whether or not I love his scheme is a whole different thing. And then Kellen Moore, who's had success in this league as a play caller. And if he brings any sort of semblance of life to this offense, to me, I think they're going to have questions about Sirianni, which they're already swirling right now. People want him out of the building, I'm sure. I'm sure fans don't want him there either. I was one of the guys who felt that he should be fired now. Because to me, it doesn't make sense to keep him on. But it's just something to look at, guys. As this offseason continues and as the year continues on, really think long and hard about what Philadelphia can do for the next few years to sustain success. And having a head coach on a 1-year deal, coaching for his job, after you just hired a young, innovative play caller and a veteran defensive coach who's had head coaching experience before. Are you telling me that that doesn't smell like something fishy if I'm Nick Sirianni? Because I'll tell you what, from Nick Sirianni's shoes, something smells rotten in Denmark. And Denmark, in this case, it's Philadelphia. Hey, you got through a full episode of the Riding the Bench Eagles podcast. Thank you for watching. If you want to support the channel, hit the like and subscribe button below. You can also check us out on Instagram at the Riding the Bench podcast with a K instead of C in the word podcast. And also check us out on audio platforms like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, you name it, we're on there. All of that is in the description below. Please come back next time for the Riding the Bench Eagles podcast. Thanks for listening.